The legal cannabis industry facing a major hurdle as a lawsuit forces a pause across the whole state. We'll hear from a lawyer on this lawsuit and why they say it's such a major issue. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. The legal cannabis rollout in New York State facing yet another setback after the latest state Supreme Court hearing. The entire industry is once again on pause or hold. The freeze is in place because the Office of Cannabis Management is facing a lawsuit filed by a group of veterans who allege that they were not included in the initial rollout process. After a bit of legal back and forth, it looked like a few select retailers would operate while the lawsuit continued. But these veterans argued those applicants did not even meet all of the licensing requirements. OCM now needs to resubmit their list of licensees who do meet those specific requirements. The court plans to address each on an individual basis. We are joined now by lawyer and expert in marijuana law, Ryan McCall with Tully Rinke. Ryan, thanks for coming back on the show again. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Talk a little bit about this lawsuit, who these veterans are, where they're from, and what their point is and why they're bringing this case.
So effectively, the veterans are alleging a few things. The most important of the matters are they're saying that when OCM created the justice involved class, meaning that the applicant for the original conditional adult use dispensary license had to be justice involved, meaning that they or a family member needed to be impacted regardless of a marijuana related conviction. And now what the veterans are saying is effectively, we were left out as a result of this. They're saying that OCM and the Cannabis Control Board never followed through and did the proper procedures, meaning that they needed to bring this to the legislature, and the legislature actually would have been the group to be able to say, this is going to be okay, which is what the veterans lawsuit's alleging. Got you.
And it feels like this has not been the only delay in getting legal marijuana out there. It's been a couple of years now. Is it my imagination to think that they've got ahead over their skis a little bit on a lot of these things, and it's resulted in lawsuits?
Unfortunately, there is a lot of frustration in the cannabis industry right now. The main reason being is I believe the Office of Cannabis Management said they wanted to have approximately 20 dispensaries open by the end of last year. We're now coming on the end of 2023, and I believe at this time there's only approximately 23 to 25 dispensaries that have been opened. I think the main point of frustration is they were looking to expand the original card application program. And you're seeing people, specifically the veterans in this case, who are saying, when is it going to be our turn? When are we going to be able to have our bite at the apple to be able to open up a dispensary along with other types of businesses such as women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses?
It's starting to feel, too, as a journalist watching this, that this is a case where if they had brought the lawyers in, the legal experts, at the beginning of the process, say, are we okay doing it this way? They might have saved themselves a lot of trouble, or is that my imagination? Because now the lawyers are coming on the back end, but they're coming in with lawsuits.
And I would agree. In this situation specifically, what you're seeing is a lot of people who are saying, okay, we somewhat let this go because sometimes litigation can take years to unplay, right? In this specific situation, everybody's saying enough is enough. We're able to raise serious constitutional issues on the state level, and we believe we're going to be correct, which is why I think this lawsuit was brought in addition to the mounting frustration of the lack of rollout for cannabis licenses. What you're seeing now is you have Justice Bryan down in Ulster County who is agreeing with them on a lot of these issues, at least on a temporary basis, which has been enough to issue this injunction.
Does this stop in New York State, or does this end up going to a higher court beyond us? Where do you feel this is going to land?
Ultimately, this is a state constitutional issue. At least that's where the majority of the issues in the lawsuit are being alleged. So the highest court this could go to would be the appellate division and then potentially the Court of Appeals. And
this feels a lot, Ryan, like good intentions but bad outcome. Like I certainly, the governor on down, they had the right idea in mind. Let's make sure the people who get first crack or first bite of the apple, to use your analogy, are the people who've been hurt by these older laws. The intention was certainly there, but maybe just the execution, is that the problem?
Absolutely. In this case, I think you just have to go back to all of the missteps, right? They were talking about potentially at the end of the summer being able to open up the general application pool. And it wasn't until this lawsuit was alleged when there was a letter from OCM and the Cannabis Control Board saying, oh, well, we were planning on doing this in the fall. However, that was really the first time anybody was hearing about it until they got the letter.
We've also ran stories, Ryan, on the fact that separate of this, on their own railroad tracks, so to speak, you have the people growing the cannabis, and they're stockpiling it, and they need these places, these licenses out there and these places open, correct? Because there's a shelf life on some of this stuff. You just can't sit for 3 years, right?
Absolutely. And that's where the farmers really come into play. Throughout this whole process, the farmers have really been the ones who've been losing out. And the reason for that is they were effectively able to get the go ahead to start growing sooner. But due to the bottleneck with the application process and the lack of rollout for the dispensaries, they've only really had 20 to 25 places over the last 6 months where they've been able to sell their product. And unfortunately, a lot of these farmers are growing product based on expecting 150 plus consumers. So the issue really now is they're having to take pay cuts. They're not being able to make as much money as they originally thought. They most likely have extensive loans, and it's just becoming a real serious issue for them.
And briefly, that's also an issue of people who've leased spaces who thought their license was coming now, right? I was reading one New York Times article. People were told next week you'll be opening, and now they're being told you can't, but they're already paying for the space. They've got insurance lined up. It's costing them as well.
Yes, and that somewhat goes back to the most recent order, which was issued by Justice Bryant as of yesterday, where OCM had represented at the previous court hearing that they have 30 dispensaries that have complied with all of the regulations that are necessary to open. And Justice Bryant effectively said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have a carve out as part of this injunction, which allows those 30 dispensaries to open. As of yesterday, in the last couple of days, it became apparent that that was somewhat misrepresented by the Office of Cannabis Management. And they don't necessarily know out of those 30 applicants how many of them actually have completed all of the steps. So now what you're seeing is the court is saying, we're going to do this on a case-by-case basis. We want to see for every applicant out of those 30 that had substantially complied with all of the requirements to be able to open, we want to be able to go through each one of those to say, okay, this one's getting the stamp to go on ahead, and they're not really taking OCM for their word at this point.
All right, Ryan McCall, thanks. We're out of time, but thank you for coming on. Tully Rinke, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The governor and the mayor of New York City are calling on the federal government for additional support amid this surge of migrants. But the Biden administration is saying not yet. We'll talk with a reporter from The Hill on the latest back and forth and what could be next. Also, if you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. As New York's asylum seeker situation continues to develop, both Governor Hochul and New York City Mayor Eric Adams are making appeals to the federal government for additional support, and they need it now. The calls include reimbursement of New Yorkers, expedited work authorization, and additional help distributing migrants around the country, not just New York. Department of Homeland Security responding to those calls with a letter saying the city has around 24 things it could be doing better to meet the needs of the incoming asylum seekers. The letter highlights shortcomings in the planning, the data collection, and the other day-to-day operations. The mayor of the city weighing in.
We are going to continue to push for those things that are important. Just think about it, 10,000 people a month, it's just not sustainable. If the plan is let's continue to find places in New York City to accommodate the migrants, that's not a plan.
Officials have identified 11 federal sites across the state that may be able to house some migrants, while Governor Hochul continues to speak with the White House officials on ways to expedite the work authorization. Joining us now to give additional insight on the latest back and forth over these new migrants, Raphael Burnell. He's a staff writer for the political website The Hill. Raphael, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Hey, thanks for having me.
How big an issue is immigration and the asylum seekers in D.C.? I know it was sort of one of those issues in New York. We were looking at it from afar, but then suddenly the buses start arriving. It becomes a state and a local issue. What's the read there in D.C.? Is it right on the front burner?
Well, it's not on the front burner for two reasons. First, because Congress is very worried about passing any sort of budget, about avoiding a government shutdown. And second of all, because it is, although it is a central issue toward 2024, it's not the only issue, but it is important in terms of the campaigns. The Biden administration feels like it's paddling upstream with this issue with voters. Some immigration advocates disagree with that read, but that's how the Biden administration is treating it. And the border and border security will continue to be an issue, and it's an issue that Republicans will not stop raising.
You wonder if outside looking in, if you're just a casual observer and you watch this going on for decades, Larry, not this right moment right now, but the stuff leading up to it, you start to wonder if they don't want to fix it, because it seems like if it was a priority, and you also see some fundraising happening with politicians off of this issue. How much is politics mixed in with all of this, and that makes it almost impossible to solve?
Well, if you ask the Republicans who really want to fix it, and there are a few of them who've been vocal about that they want to fix it, they'll say that's true. The Democrats don't want to fix it. And if you ask the Democrats who really want to fix it, they will say that the Republicans don't want to fix it and want to keep this as an issue. There's plenty of blame to go around. And in the past, over the past 30 years, there have been moments where near agreements have been scuttled by either party for different political reasons, for their inside reasons. So there's a lot of mistrust. There's the people who know the issue in Congress don't talk to each other because they've been cheated in the past, frankly.
You know, it's interesting. I'm in a very blue state, New York, and you can't help but sense, whatever side of the aisle you're on, there's a little bit of egg on the faces of some Democrats here, including the governor on down, where, you know, when this was a Texas issue, a southern border issue, it was easy to say, oh, you've got to let these people in. You've got to welcome them. They deserve to come. And even going so far as saying, hey, we're a sanctuary city here and there. Our doors are welcome. You know, some people accused them of virtue signaling at the time, but there was no way to know if they really felt that way, or if it was a little bit of virtue signaling. Now the buses arrive, and it's become overwhelming for the state, overwhelming for New York City. And suddenly they're saying, wait a second, I know we said people are welcome, but we can't take this many people.
Well, the irony there is that it's overwhelming mostly because a lot of these migrants can't work legally, and they do want to work legally, and a lot of them are, you know, working age capable migrants, capable workers rather, and I mean, Governor Hochul has brought it up a lot that the main issue is work permits. It's not that these people are there. They could be adding to the economy, and instead they're making a difficult shelter situation, which already was difficult without the migrants. They're making that situation worse. And it's really no fault of their own. The Biden administration has its hands tied to a degree. Frankly, immigration law is since 1996, since the 1996 reform, has made it very difficult, has made it very bureaucratic to get these work permits out quickly. And you know, immigration advocates say that the Biden administration isn't using enough of its toolkit to go around this problem, to help places like New York not have these migrants in shelters, but instead, you know, either working in the city or going upstate to work on dairy farms that really need workers. You know, a whole series of industries that are looking for more workers. And the solution just isn't coming. The Biden administration has certain reasons. It doesn't want to be too aggressive. It doesn't want the lawsuits from the other side of the aisle. It doesn't want to give, in their estimation, the appearance that it's you know, quote unquote open borders and encourage more migration. Though one point is important there. U.S. policy has rarely been the detonator of migration regionally.
Yeah, you kind of touched on where I want to go next. The next question, it's a double-edged sword. First part of it is, you know, I've heard Democrats saying Biden can do this through executive order. Is the first part of it, is that true, or does Congress have to tweak the law a little bit to allow him to start handing out work authorization? Here's your work permit. Go to work. There's the field. There's the job. Go with God. And the second part is, and again, this goes back to politics, but also reality. If you suddenly do that, are you sending a message to everything south of the border that, look, these folks got in, yeah, they had a rough month or two where they were bussed around, but now they're working, it's great, you should do this too. Does it open the doors even more?
So the work permit situation is incredibly complicated. It depends on how some people got on how they got in. If somebody's been paroled into the country, not paroled into the country, if they sought asylum after crossing the border illegally, like, everything has an asterisk. There are a few simpler solutions. The administration is frustrated because those people who got paroled in, they can skip the long waiting period for applying for work permits. But you know, it's very hard. It's hard for immigration lawyers to know who's where, and apparently Governor Hochul did make some progress on that the CBP-1 app, which is the way the Biden administration is asking people to register to come in and seek asylum. Apparently, that app is going to start telling people, just notifying people whether they are eligible to apply for work permits. So that could solve part of the problem, but it's really a statute issue. Congress would have to come in if they wanted to fix the issue holistically. The Biden administration does have some more executive tools. There's a lot of talk of temporary protected status. That's a program that basically they would declare all the nationals of a certain country that are already here, they are able to work for the next 18 months. They do that for many countries, but that's where the Biden administration, they argue that, yes, it would detonate more migration from specific countries. Immigrant advocates and really people who talk to migrants and really know them, they don't buy it. They simply say, like, the conditions that make a family want to leave and cross through Mexico, and Mexico is having a lot of public safety issues. Mm-hmm. Those conditions, like, they don't care if they're going to end up in a shelter in New York and frustrated and waiting to work. They are not in mortal danger. So there is that debate whether there is that magnet effect by issuing work permits, but of the people I've talked to, the people who are closest to the migrants, they just don't buy it.
Because I'm a news geek, I like watching the White House press briefings just for entertainment purposes to see how the back and forth goes. And I noticed yesterday, I happened to watch it, and Karine Jean-Pierre got the question, I don't know who asked it, it could have been you in the room, I don't know, but they said, Kathy Hochul from New York came here desperate, hat in hand, looking for help, and the president didn't meet directly with her. I think Mayorkas was there and some other people. Should we read anything into that the president didn't actually sit with our governor from New York, or is that just the press trying to amp something up a little bit?
I wouldn't read into it. Apparently, the meeting with Mayorkas and the White House chief of staff, it was productive. What Hochul announced on the way out about the CBP-1 app, if it turns out to be true, and if it turns out that this part of the app actually works, that could relieve a lot of the pressure. So that is progress. DHS going up to New York, well, I don't know if that's substantial progress. They have an eye on it. It's New York's woes with dealing with shelter space, they're national. We all know about them. But it is progress. I don't know if having the president there would have added much to that conversation, because it was kind of in the weeds. But it does show the very different approach of Governor Hochul versus Mayor Adams. And I think what the White House, part of what the White House is trying to do here is show that collaborative approach yields results and the combative approach does not.
Last 20 seconds, so I'll need a quick answer. We've had the luxury that it's summertime when a lot of this crisis is happening now, especially in New York City, where they've got like 60,000, not enough room. 3 or 4 months from now, it's going to be 0 degrees in New York City and a lot of places in the state, especially upstate. They're on the clock, aren't they? They've got to figure this out soon, because they got to put these people somewhere. They can't be on the street.
That is true. And the question will be, will Texas keep busing people north during the winter when there is actually a lethal danger, 0 degrees, as you say?
All right. Thank you, Rafael Bernal from the Hill. Good work down in D.C., and we look forward to talking to you down the road.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. County and state officials coordinating a response as overdoses are spiking around the state. When we come back, we'll break down the steps the new task force will take to reduce overdoses. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. Also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter. We're right there at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. This past week, the state marked Overdose Awareness Day, remembering those lost to substance abuse. The remembrance coming as the state takes steps to combat this growing overdose problem. This week, the Interagency Overdose Prevention Task Force met for the very first time. The group bringing together leaders from multiple agencies with the goal of reviewing the latest data and making suggestions with how to combat overdoses. The group's formation coming as statewide overdoses have increased according to state data. Task force members sounded off after the first meeting.
It's about all of government working together, like we do during the pandemic, to try to solve a really big problem.
We need to focus on harm reduction because that's really about keeping people alive.
Task force will have 6 more meetings and will issue a final report on October the 15th. Governor Hochul allocating some $8 million to what are called harm reduction strategies to reduce these overdoses. This coming as nearly $200 million has been distributed, stemming from the national opioid settlement case. A portion of the settlements received by the state goes straight to municipalities statewide. The remainder, the state allocates for communities to apply for. The $8 million in new funding will expand harm reduction services and develop a statewide coroner training program. As one funding recipient explains, this money will have a significant impact in the community.
This is what I wish was happening to me when I was actively using. Have somebody there that I could actually identify with, you know, and that has been going through the things that I went through in life and able to guide me to get out of that cycle.
Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. If you have a comment or story idea, please let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Finally, on Empire State Weekly, we're looking ahead at school is set to start across the state next week, and officials will have to contend with the ever-present risk of disease. In addition to rising COVID-19 cases around the state, health officials are sounding the alarm about a new COVID variant that has now been detected in New York. As COVID poses a risk, so do the familiar health concerns surrounding our kids, flu and RSV. We'll take a look to speak with a health expert on the steps that parents, students, and the schools can take to promote safety in the school this school year. For all of us here now at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York. Here's a full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across the great state of New York.